Wow, good afternoon to the American Percussion Seminar. We're thrilled to have Christopher Deane with us to present a clinic on timpani performance. I'm sure he's going to talk about his marimba and vibraphone literature and his approach to it a little bit. All right. But we're so thrilled to have him here. We just came off of a great session with Kaylee Brooke, and it's just been an amazing 8 days. And we have two more. Monday and Tuesday are also going to be very special. So I'm going to ask, first off, I guess I should introduce Christopher Deane. Christopher and I have taught together since, it's been a lot of years, 1992, I feel like we started. We were only in sixth grade. We started teaching people. No, we were started to work
2 years to complete sixth grade. So.
We started to teach at East Carolina University together, and now we've been comrades at University of North Texas for, wow, over 20 years together now. And I just can't tell you what you're in for a real treat, because no one speaks about timpani performance and musicianship the way Christopher does. I've learned so much from him, and I know you will too. So if you guys could please give him a big APS welcome here. Virtual welcome. There we go.
I can hear it. I can feel it. Well, it's really great to be with you, and I really appreciate so much being invited to do this, Professor Ford, Mark. And it's great to be joining you for this. I know you've had a terrific week. And, when it all started, when he approached me about being a part of this, Professor Ford said that he wanted me to sort of try to discuss tone production, because he's seen me do this before. And, tone production on timpani is a really important thing. Not that it isn't on everything we play. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I will shift the camera over to show you a marimba if you haven't seen one before, and talk a little bit about tone on that instrument. But most of the time, it is going to be focused on timpani, but I'm going to try to tie it in, make sure that you understand that a lot of these principles work sort of the same way. But timpani is an instrument that I think tone is, for a classical player, tone is really preeminent, and we're going to get into it. It might be dry from time to time, so I apologize about that. Might not be the most thrilling clinic, but I'm serious about this, and I really believe that after 40 some years of playing timpani, I've grown and I've learned a lot. I've been blessed to have some really great teachers, including my very first teacher, who I mentioned in the article that hopefully all you have. I will be referencing that. He was a timpanist. He had been the timpanist of the St. Louis Symphony, and he had studied with Saul Goodman, not the TV lawyer, but the timpanist of the New York Philharmonic for 40 some years. And he also studied with Goodman's teacher, who was a guy named Alfred Friese. Great book out there by Alfred Friese as well. So I was, unbeknownst to me, studying with a guy who really understood this instrument. And to this day, and I've heard a lot of timpanists, I've never heard anybody play and produce the beauty of sound that Massey Johnson produced. It was just gorgeous. Didn't matter what the dynamic level was, what the repertoire was. He always had just a beautiful sense of tone. Maybe it's because he started life as a cellist and then he awakened to the power of the timpani along the way. I don't know, but I know that it was really special. I went on to study with Roland Koloff, who was a timpanist in the New York Philharmonic for many years. I studied with Eugene Espino, who was timpanist in the Cincinnati Symphony. I drove up to Black Mountain, North Carolina to take lessons with the retired timpanist of the New York City Ballet and Opera, a guy named Leonard Schulman, who'd actually played timpani in the Philly Orchestra for a year before Fred Hinger took over. And he was in addition to playing in the New York Ballet and Opera, City Ballet and Opera. He had been timpanist in the National Symphony. That was his first gig, not a bad first gig. So I took lessons with lots of other people along the way. And amazingly enough, I've never met two people that struck the drum exactly the same way and approached a lot of the repertoire the same way. So what does this tell us? It means anything goes. Well, maybe. But there are some basics that I'm going to talk about today that I do believe in. They work for me. Some of them are things I've learned, some of the things I've just adapted in my own way. But they all have at their principle the idea of the physics of producing tone. It's not just I'm going to hit the drum, it's the physics of producing tone. You know, in the article that I sent you, and I'm going to start kind of with that, because when I first arrived to UNT, I had never taught timpani on the level that I was teaching it. Suddenly I was teaching 30 people a week timpani, and I had never taught that many timpanists before in my life. I'd teach a timpanist here and there, and a snare drummer, and a mallet player, and a vibe player, and cymbals, and blah, blah, blah. But suddenly it was just like this tsunami of, in a good way, of timpanists walking in and out. And I was amazed at the variance of what they all did. And maybe you've experienced this too. And hopefully some of you have actually studied with people who play timpani all the time, because you will find that there are subtleties sometimes between them and people who play it only some of the time. And nothing against that at all, but I would advise you at some point to definitely invest in taking lessons with people who are, you know, full-time timpanists, because they will teach you lots of things. Okay, so we know we have the 3 main schools of timpani playing in the United States. There's still vestiges of it. It's kind of filtered out, and the European stroke has become very, very important and very influential on American timpani playing too. But it was Fred Hinger, Saul Goodman, and Cloyd Duff. These were the 3 names that when I was young, they were the names that you would, you know, laud, and you'd go to their clinics, and there were no videos because there was no YouTube. So if you didn't go to clinics, you didn't get to see them play, but you'd see their students play. And a lot of the information you get was from them. Okay, so far so good. But they were all remarkably different. Oh, remarkably different. All I can say is my background was very New York, which means it's very Saul Goodman. Generally, just to talk about grip very quickly, it's the front of the hand plus a couple of fingers, but never the pinky. Never the pinky. Cloyd Duff used to make fun of this and say, we're not drinking a cup of tea, we're playing timpani, because he was a believer in all the fingers on the stick. But Goodman felt very strategically that the pinky had a limiting quality on the stick. So my playing for years was in we'll call it the American grip position, which I still use, by the way. And it was without the pinky. It had a lot of finger action going on in the stroke. I'll talk about that in a few minutes here. When we get to the Hinger grip, it was all over the place. I mean, when I saw Hinger give clinics, he had thumbs off the stick. He had all fingers on. He used a lot of the German position, Americanish position. There was Frenchness in there too. We'll get to that in a minute. He had a lot of back of the hand strokes in all of those positions. There were middle of the hand strokes. He taught his students to play with the stick in different divisions of the hand for different things. That looks kind of familiar to some of you, I imagine. So interestingly enough, very different. And then we get to the Duff School. And I didn't study with Duff. I went to clinics of his. I've taken lessons with some of his students over the years. And so my understanding of how things were done in that school of playing was largely the wrist was in, and all the fingers were on the stick very lightly. Well, you might raise your hand and say, come on, we're just hitting drums. Just grab the stick and hit the drum. Touch is vitally important in the way that we play timpani. Not different than marimba, not different than xylophone or snare drum, but it's astonishing to me how few people come to college with very little understanding of how you hit the drum emanates from how you hold the stick. So I'll take just a few minutes to talk about that. It's not going to go into a lot of depth with it, but all of these grips have a profound, in my feeling, is it possible to combine subtly profound? Probably not. But that they have an influence on how the stick sounds. And so I'm going to talk about them. One of the things that's interesting is Ed Soph was our master drum set player. He's a legend. You all hopefully know who he is. And if you don't, you need to, because he was really a great man. And it still amazes me when I walk the halls of UNT and I'm getting to teach next to people like Ed Smith and Mark Ford and Quincy Davis, our new drum set teacher, and Sandy Rennick and Paul Rennick, and all these people. These are amazing, amazing people. It still kind of blows my mind that I'm allowed to do this. But I think we all make our contributions, and so what I do is I teach timpani. But I was talking to Ed Soph, and at that point I'd been here about a year and a half, and I was thinking that maybe the jazz players didn't need to take timpani because, you know, that's not really their gig. They need to be able to play 10,000 amazing polyrhythms and be able to do it while balancing cymbals on their forehead. And, you know, it's tremendous what they're able to do. And timpani doesn't really seem to necessarily mean that much to them. It's true in the lessons too. But I tried to adapt my teaching to accommodate what they would use. So at any rate, Ed Soph, I proposed this to him. And he said, well, maybe they don't need 2 levels. Because the second level is about orchestral literature and interpretation of things. But he said, 1 level fundamental, level number 1, he said, absolutely they should keep doing that. Because that's where they learn how to produce a good tone on a drum. And, you know, it was like, wow, of course, you know, that's what I believe, you know, but that was coming from Ed Soph, one of the great jazz drum set players in history, you know, Hall of Famer and everything like that. So that shows you how important, and Ed, by the way, wasn't a bad timpanist. He kind of goofed around in my office sometimes and sounded pretty good. But he understood that. Now, I have one story to share, and then I'm going to do some demoing, okay? I am, promise. The last departmental of the first year I was here, all the jazzers would wait to the last departmental. I'm sure Professor Ford remembers this. It was the longest departmental, 3+ hours, because they would all just go, oh man, what am I going to do? Oh, grab a bass player, piano player, go at it. And then they would say, all right, you know, straight no chaser, and then they would dig in. So they weren't really necessarily always preparing the way that the classical marimbas and all were. Long story short, it was almost all drum set. But to save time, they had this really beautiful drum set. I don't remember the brand exactly, but it was really a beautiful drum set. Brand new condition. One of the students owned it. And it had, I don't know what kind of heads it had on it. I couldn't see it. But there were 2 players. They were both, I'm going to go ahead and use the term Latin. They were both of Latin origin. And they were both playing tunes that were, we'll call it Latin originated tunes, you know. And so similar style. That's my point, similar style. And the first player came up and he played, and his stroke was a really heavy, strong downstroke on all the tom-toms. You know, really punchy, really, really, not inappropriate, you know, perfectly fine, but that was his stroke. Everything was lift and drop, lift and drop, lift and drop, lift and drop. And the drum set sounded to me, with my agedness even then, like a black dot, Remo-headed black dot, you know, clear-headed set of toms. That's what it sounded like. Do, 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 do. You know, so the next guy came up, and he was from Brazil, actually, and he played his solo. It was a completely different drum set. And his stroke was one in which the louder he played, the more lift he got in the stick. Now, I don't know where he learned from, because he didn't actually take lessons with me. But he came here, somebody in Brazil, I assume, unless he came by it naturally, had showed him this. So here's the thing, and I'm going to demonstrate some of this as we go along, but the difference between this and this is what we're doing to the head. Duh. Your minds are all blown now, I understand. I see it in your faces. Oh my gosh. But this is not, and you'd be amazed at how many people pay no attention to this whatsoever. They come in, they've learned this stroke since the 5th grade, and that's how they hit the drums. The problem is, timpani are gigantic heads that are incredibly thin, and they are going to react to how much energy goes into the drum. Okay, you follow me so far? The energy going down into the drum head can either distort the head or just ask it to vibrate. I'm going to repeat that. Hitting down into the drum head can distort the head, or it can allow it to vibrate. It depends on how much energy. I'll demo this again in a minute. So when we talk about strokes, there basically are three, count them, three kinds of strokes that we use on all the instruments if we're a fairly complete but simplistic player. We use downstrokes, we use what we call a rebounding stroke. Stick goes down, stick goes up. That's what Cloyd Duff used to call it. Down, up, down, up, down, up. And then there is what we'll call a lifting stroke. And a lifting stroke, it can be a light lift. It can be with the arm, although it can also be with the wrist very effectively. But it's away from the head. Let me see if I can demo this for you without too much angst here. So the downstroke at a moderate dynamic, it's no big deal. And I know Professor Ford and I tried to get the sound balanced. I hope it sounds okay to you. It might be a little distorted, but I think so. Okay. So that's a downstroke. Now, the dynamic I'm using right now is something I would consider to be a Mezzo Forte dynamic. Now I'm into a forte, and now here we go, folks. Get ready. Okay, now that was the loudest downstroke. I call that fortissimo. I don't know if you could hear it, but the pitch rose when I really hit the drum. Did you all hear that? How the pitch was leaping up? Yeah, good. Of course. Why is that? Because I'm stretching the head. I'm hitting so hard that the head is distorting because I'm hitting down into the drum head. And here's the unfortunate fact for all of you folks. I can pull a lot of vinyl records from my little library in my office, CDs, and play you professional orchestra recordings where somebody's playing the Shostakovich Symphony No. 1 Timpani solo, and the pitch is just bending all over the place because they're using that heavy downstroke. The misconception is this: downstroke is not, I repeat that word, is not the best loud stroke. Think about it for a minute. By the way, that thingy over there is a marimba. It's also not the best stroke to use on a marimba bar because it's the same thing. There's a point where the force, mass times acceleration, according to Newton, I think that's right, mass times acceleration, the force is more than the bar can handle because it's down, it's into the bar. If you're going to karate chop something, to break it, you're going to go through it. And that's what a downstroke is, all right? I'm not going to ask for the show of hands, but I want to ask you all, in your mind, answer the question, do I have these three strokes clearly defined in my mind? Downstroke, rebound stroke, lifting stroke. Most of you may think you do, but we're going to kind of talk about it here for a second. So, I'm going to try to go over to the timpani, and hopefully you can still hear me. Just let me know. I'm almost done with this, by the way, so just hang in there. Don't worry, there are other things to talk about. But all right, these are some basic sticks. This is an IP. I've worn the number off on it. I think it might be a 5. Really use these a lot. These innovators, the red banded ones, they're really a good general stick for me. And they're medium weight. They're not too light and they're not too heavy. So, but the downstroke, that's loud, but the trouble is 20 feet away, you're not going to hear much pitch. You're not going to hear the vibrancy of the head. So now I'm going to play that same sort of thing using the lifting stroke. Now it's still loud, but hopefully you might be able to hear the difference. The volume is basically the same, but the essence of the quality of sound is different. There was a local timpanist a few years ago who was taking a national audition, and for some reason he decided he wanted to come and take a lesson with the old broken down professor at UNT, which I was happy to do this, you know. And this fellow was probably one of the most highly developed technical timpanist I've ever heard play. Really clean. All the excerpts were memorized. Everything was really clean. But he went to play Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, which is those actually the two pitches I'm playing on now. And when he played the end of the symphony, it was loud, but everything he did was down into the drum. Everything was. So when he finished, and he was looking for feedback, and I'd heard him play many times in the orchestra. He said, "Well, what do you think? How do you think?" And I said, "If you did that from behind a screen on stage, and I was one of the judges, you would be out of contention." And he was like, "What?" He was already playing professionally, and he was all technically developed. But I said, "It just sounds really, really ugly." And he said, "Well, how would you do it?" And so I went over and I showed him that I used that really supercharged lift stroke. And the good news is he heard the difference. Some people don't. They're just so in tune to what they hear, they don't hear what you're doing. So he said, "Well, so what are you doing? How are you doing that?" And I showed him, and of course, because he was such a strong technician, he was able to do it. And he said, "All right, I'm going to go home. I'm going to record myself doing both, really take the final measure, and then I'll call you back." So he did. And he called me back. He said, "You know what? I think it makes a difference. And next week, I'm going up to Philadelphia, take a lesson with Don Liuzzi and see what he thinks." And of course, Don is a big lifter. If you know his playing, beautiful player, really tremendous timpanist. And there's a lot of really lifting playing in there. Jerry Carlos student. And I don't remember who else he studied with. I know that was one of his big influences. And Carlos was a Goodman student. Goodman lifted all the time. Goodman was a big lifter too. That's where a lot of this comes from. So he won the gig. Now, I'm not saying he won the gig because of me, but interestingly enough, subsequently, if you watch this gentleman play, and he's really very successful, big timpanist out there now, he uses lift like crazy. So it made a huge difference. And he was enough of a musician, more than enough. I mean, he was an exceptional musician to recognize that what I was telling him was, it was the gospel. It was, you need to be able to play beautifully at all levels. So what does that mean to play beautifully at all dynamic levels and get vibrancy at all dynamic levels? It means we're doing what French horn players do, what string players do. My son's a violinist. What brass players do. If a trombonist came in and played bolero, solo trombone, I met the guy who premiered that, by the way, 1,000 years ago, but Sir Leo Arno, who also wrote the Olympic theme, the original one, that march that they come in on, but he was the original trombonist. But I don't know why that's interesting to you. It is to me, but it doesn't. Anyway, the point is this: if a trombonist came in and everything was splat, 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 like it is when you beat down into the timpani head, nobody's going to hire that person. They're not going to want to make music with that person. They spend hours and hours of their life perfecting that quality of resonance and evenness and balance. So that's where the stroke types come in. Now I'm going to, just curious, does anybody have any questions so far? Anybody? That's okay. You don't have to have the questions. There are a couple of chat things here. Let's see what we got here. No, I didn't say who the timpanist is because I probably shouldn't, but he's a great man. He's a big guy, one of the big time timpanists, okay? By the way, he did go to UNT, but before I was teaching here, so okay, we're proud of that. All right, let me do a little more demoing here for you. So we've got three basic stroke types. We've got the downstroke, and sometimes it's just brutal when I have high schoolers come in for their auditions and, I'm worried for the head, I mean, literally. So that's the worst case scenario. So, but downstroke, rebounding stroke, and me, the rebounding stroke, is a mid-dynamic stroke. Basically, just about anything goes. You know, that's not a bad tone, mid-dynamic. So almost anything you do with the mid-dynamic, depending on the head tensions, is probably going to work okay. So, anyway, now we get to the extremes. Think about it, folks. When you're playing marimba, when you're playing xylophone, tambourine, cymbals, just about everything we play, it's those extreme levels where we have to work the hardest, period. So on timpani, one of the problems is when we're playing softly, is getting the rhythm to project. Now these drums right now are tuned pretty tight. You know, we've got an A and an E. By the way, when you tune a fifth, it's got to be perfect. Fifths are perfect interval. My advice is always to tune a drum using the resonance of one to adjust the other. Usually the one drum will tell you when the other one's in tune, so the key to that is listen to the drum you're not tuning. That's the key. The drum that's not being tuned is the one that's going to tell you when the other drum is in tune. There are a lot of teachers that teach this way, but not everybody. But fourths, fifths, octaves, unisons. You can be perfectly in tune with these if you do this. Just pick one drum, get it in tune, tune the other one to that. So, all right. So now we talk about soft playing. So it's okay. The moment I start putting really small rhythm values in there, they get a little bit messy. They get a little bit lost. Here's what I do. Grip, when I play softly, this is me now, but it works for me. I turn my hand over into what Eugene Espino in Cincinnati Symphony called position number 3. He thought of it as 4 positions of the hand. So position number 3 is almost German, but not quite. Next, what I do, I'm going to get rid of all the fingers that I don't need. Why? They're there. Why not use them? Well, because they add extra complexity to the grip, and therefore they kind of slow the stick down. Why is that important? Because when you're talking about a really soft rhythm, speed of getting off the head puts the greatest point to the sound. But Professor Deane, I want to play a legato phrase. Yeah, well, being understood is the most important thing. If you can play a legato phrase, great, you can do it. But squeezing the stick, almost staccato style with the point, getting rid of the fingers, gets that stick up off the head really quickly. And these sticks are not very articulate. Okay, so. Now I'll talk about stick choice in a minute, but for now, that's going to be about the best clarity I'm going to get out of these sticks. So here it is with all the fingers on the stick and a relaxed legato stroke. Now here it is. I don't know if you can hear the subtlety there, but it's clear here and it projects. Okay, so far so good. Now, what about the loudest strokes? Because a lot of times the loud is really where we get in the biggest trouble. If I've got, something like so let's say a combination of pitches like that, E, G, and F. This is a tight drum. This is a medium tension drum, maybe a little below that. It's pretty low. So which drum comes out the clearest and the most distinct? I'm pretty sure it's that one. That drum's going to be the one that projects. Does that sound like a really even solo? No. So I have to do something to even the surface tensions out. Here's the cool thing. If I use this super lift, it allows this drum to balance this one much more clearly. So far, so good? All right. Now, generally when I'm doing this, technically, I'm using mostly wrist. I've got some really big strokes. My teacher used to say, sometimes you have to scratch your back with a loud note. Saul Goodman used to use J strokes, which is still a lifting stroke. The idea is I'm not hitting down into the drum, I'm arriving on the surface of the drum and then getting out of the way. My teacher used to say it's like drawing sound out of the drum. It's not doing any drawing. I don't hear anything. Nope, don't hear anything. What it's doing is it's keeping the stroke to the surface of the drum head. I'm not hitting the drum. Now I'm hitting the drum. I'm controlled how much I go down into the head. So, sorry, I know this is kind of boring here, but soft playing, I get the fingers off the stick because I can put the greatest pinch here and it allows me to put a point on the sound. It may seem subtle, but remember, classical music is the art of subtlety. That's what it is. Whether you're playing marimba or xylophone or finger cymbals, doesn't matter. The subtleties are what makes the music special, and we have to pay attention to that. Medium stroke, just about anything goes. You know, I just want to let the stick do as much of the work as I can. The weight of the stick does so much of the work for me. I'm going to demonstrate in a minute something for you. And then loud, now you might raise your hand and say, Professor Deane, I want to play fortissimo, but I want to play it very lyrically and beautifully. And I've heard timpani clinics where the clinician will say, it must always be legato, always. So. And all I hear is bang, 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 bang. I don't hear quality of sound. Trombonists couldn't get away with it. Violinists can't. I shouldn't either. So in my opinion, when we play fortissimo, and think about it, fortissimo is not where we are, you know, selling the beauty of love and romance usually. It's get out of the room, the building's on fire. You know, there's a guy with a high-powered weapon coming down the hall. Fortissimo is that energy. So I want the sound to project, I want the pitch to project, but for me, that means everything is lift, so. And it comes out remarkably clear and predictable and like that. Anybody, I'm gonna scoot on now from grip and stroke. Anybody got any questions? Okay.
Yes, just one, sorry.
Good.
So with like a lift stroke, right? You're putting less energy into the drum, as it were. So is it true that it can't possibly be as loud as a downstroke or a full stroke?
Really, that's a really, really great question. And okay, it's gonna mess my sticks up a little bit, but that's okay. So, music stand, towel. Is it height of the stick coming down into the head, or is it speed of the stick that produces amplitude? Which is it? It's two, it's speed of the stick.
Yeah.
Right. So the difference is when you come down into the head, because you're distorting the head, the quality of the vibrancy is not going to project that pitch. It's in distortion. By the time that head gets over the distortion and achieves vibrancy, it's over. The impact is gone. So the important thing is you need to get the head to sound with vibrancy. And again, this is exactly the question that gentleman who's now a mega famous timpanist asked me. He said, how can you play so loud? And when I walked over and I played it for him, he recognized that it was the same volume, because it has to do with the speed. Now, this is a demonstration. I know all of you have been to the swimming pools in the summer, and you've probably seen this done. It works better with a wet towel. But if I watch what happens to the music stand. I hope you can see that. When I throw the towel into the music stand, all right? So it reacts. It's got to take that energy and do something with it, all right? If I do it hard enough, it will fall over. You know, I've sort of got it propped so it won't, but you can see the idea. Now, if I use what I'm talking about, which is a lifting stroke, the stand barely moved. Did you see that? The stand almost didn't move. Oh, well, that wasn't very good. I got to go back to the swimming pool. There was another good one. Notice how the music stand barely moves. It's still vibrating though, because I'm getting up off of it so quickly that I'm allowing it to vibrate evenly. Now, I'm going to show you one other technique, which, again, a lot of people are surprised at what timpani. Timpani has technique, really? Oh my gosh, how can that possibly be? This is kind of it's a combination of, and I was very fortunate to get to work with a timpanist who used this stroke all the time. I was a percussionist a lot of time, and I was a sub timpanist for him. But he used something that sort of comes maybe from Hinger, but it's as much coming from Moeller style playing, the back of the hand. Now, for any of you that use an independent or Stevens quote unquote grip, you'll recognize that this is still gripping the stick primarily with the back of the hand. And by the way, Roland Koloff, New York Phil, he used this grip a lot, which is actually more like what Professor Hochreiner used. It's more of a European stroke than it was Saul Goodman. And even Saul complained to him about it once, and he said, well, the guy that taught me this used to play in the New York Philharmonic, which was Saul Goodman. Saul said, no, you got to have more stuff. At any rate, that was their controversy, not mine. But the back of the hand. So when do I use that? That's the ultra loud, because the cool thing about this, the back of the hand stroke, is right now, do you see what's happening to that stick? It's popping back up. Now, if I do that in the front of the hand, I have to make it come back up. The stick wants to stay down. The back of the hand really gets a good lift because it's like a rubber band. Now, I can't use this grip when I play softly. Totally ineffectual. I can't control it. Doesn't feel good. Doesn't work. But when I go to play super loud, boy, it's really great. If it rolls, you know, I'm going to play a really smooth but super loud roll. This is my go-to tool. Back of the hand. Works great. Takes some practice. And by the way, speaking of practice, developing these different grips don't have to happen in the timpani practice room. I know. I've made a big deal about touch and tone, and you can't really do it without having timpani heads to play on. We all know that. But when I took lessons with Roland Koloff, he was the first guy that really said, you know, you can get about 30% of your practicing done on a practice pad. And I always thought, no, this is so different than a timpani head. How can that possibly be effectual? I'm going to learn bad habits. But the point that he was making is you can be at home and really get a lot of work done. So here's a couple things. I'm going to give you some tips about this. First of all, you know, to play a good roll, your hands have to be matched. We all know that. And it was, I think, probably around 1984 or probably somewhere around there, where I saw Bob Becker give a clinic at a college, and we all know who Bob Becker is. Oh my gosh. We're so lucky to be breathing the same air as that gentleman on this planet. He's just an amazing musician. But so Bob said, if you only have 10 minutes or so to practice, then you have to go do something else, play unisons. That's what he said. And of course, I know I wasn't smart enough to figure this out on my own, even though I'd already goofed around with the green book and all like that. But this is a great way to start your day. I have my cup of coffee. I'll put on NPR, or God forbid, I'll watch the news. I can't do that anymore. The Weather Channel, yay. Okay, but the idea is Unison Strokes. Well, this is kind of boring. I mean, I can do this for 10 minutes, but it's kind of a yawner. I started taking things like, accents and rebounds. You all know the accents and rebound. Those patterns that are in, what pages are those, Mark? What are those pages? I think it's the first pages of it. Yeah, I think.
It's the first 10 pages or so in accents and rebounds.
So those are great because it's more interesting. And you can use lots of other books. Ted Reed's syncopation book. Oh, infinite entertainment. Oh my gosh. For any drum nerd, you can spend all day in that book. It's fun. On any instrument, by the way, finger cymbals. You want to be a good finger cymbal player? But, so the idea is, all right, you do that I usually do it for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. It's great. And I do it slower, start slower and build up, but I go through maybe 6 of them, 3-minute intervals. What's amazing about this is when I'm done, man, my technique, my chops are just can't wait to play music. They are just awake, totally awake. So it's a great place to go, and just do one at a time in the beginning. But the main thing that I noticed is going to what I call this modified French position gives me access to this. Not this, which is most everybody's mistake. They will come into me after a couple lessons and say, Professor Deane, that's never going to work for me. That grip doesn't work for me. It just doesn't work. My hands don't work right. It feels weird. It hurts. Oh no, stop. Should never hurt. The key to it is this. It's that. And there are plenty of people out there that have clinics and videos. There was a good article by Earl Yowell, who used to be timpanist in the St. Paul Chamber Players, talked about this and how to develop this. It was a really good article. There's a good article by Duncan Patton, former timpanist of the Metropolitan Opera. He has 9 different strokes that he, uses. So, but this one for me, I was always impressed with people who could do that seemingly effortlessly. How do they do that? Because I couldn't do it. My Goodman technique did not teach me how to do that. Well, this idea of using unison strokes is a great way to get at that. Don't go fast. Speed doesn't, as Professor Ford says often, speed kills. But, and in this, it could actually, I suppose. But the key to this is the angle of the wrist. Because you're not going to get that rotary motion without the angle of the wrist. Now, when I play softly, and I'm still using that same grip, you don't need much. You don't need much because there's no range of motion. The idea behind this is I can hit the drum in my collarbone with a wrist rotation, which is really handy. A lot of people find it hard to play even eighth notes, so they're going to beat down on. You're going to hear that would be unacceptable on any instrument. So you use this stroke, and I'm going to talk about the angle of the arm here for a second, but all of a sudden you have even eighth notes because all I'm doing is rotating. I am working far less hard. I am, by nature, Professor Ford can confirm this, a lazy human being. Why do I want to work harder than I need to work?
That's not true.
You're being kind, my friend. So, but the key to this is developing that. Now, most people don't develop it because they're lazy and they keep the pad down where they would play snare drum. My advice is this: elevate the pad so that your arms can't hit the rim unless you elevate the elbows. Okay? Works great. All right, we've talked about a bunch of different strokes. I've got about 10 more minutes, and I think somebody wanted to play for me at some point, which would be great. But now we're going to talk about stick choice, unless there are any questions. Any other questions? Just remember, it's that. If you want it clean, use a machine. This bend in the wrist is the machine. Another way, a lot of people teach it this way too. Put your hands together. Please, will Professor Deane's clinic end sometime in the near future? Thank you, thank you, thank you. If I grip my rib cage with the hands in this position, I get about half rotation. Pick the elbows up and I can touch solar plexus and navel. It makes that profound a difference. So I love it. I use it all the time. You know, I played a Mozart concert with the Dallas Symphony a week and a half ago, and Mozart is perfect. It's elegant perfection. When I think of Mozart, it's elegant perfection. And there are lots of times where you're playing these perfect eighth notes, and I want them to all come out perfectly cleanly. This works, folks. It really, really, really works for any of you who don't do this. Okay, now stick choice. And I don't think there's a big mystery about stick choice, but I say that, but then I think back on my students. In the early stages of lessons, hopefully you can still hear me. And I'm gonna, a little bit hard for my eyes to read here at this distance, but we'll give it a try. When they come into my office and they have any etude, the first thing they're gonna do is they're gonna use the hardest sticks they have. Sometimes they only have one pair of sticks on the stand. I go, do you own any others? We require you have at least 3 pairs. Yeah, but I didn't bring them to my lesson. Oh, okay, next time, bring them to your lesson. Okay, but, so what they're gonna do, so they'll use their hardest stick. Well, for an etude like the one I'm gonna play for you, it makes perfect sense. Okay for that. No one ever comes in with these. So, yeah, that would never work, duh, of course. However, that's the way that you get to know your sticks. And this is not a big secret in the industry either. Take 20 pairs of sticks, play the same etude, or an excerpt of it with all of them. This is how you begin to get to know the personality of your sticks. If you don't do this, it's always going to be a guessing game. You have to get to know the personality of your sticks. I don't care if you're playing marimba or, in fact, I may not get to the marimba, but you've had lots of marimba training. So, but the same thing goes. The more of this produces more resonance, less articulation. So don't always go for the hardest stick. Start in the middle of the field. Now let's talk about one more thing, which I really didn't talk about, but it relates to musicality and stroke type. So one of the etudes in the Hochriner book is, it's an adagio early in the Hochriner book, and a lot of people will play it this way. It's number 8 if you have the book. If you don't, that's okay, but it's number 8. It's a very slow etude. It's one of the required etudes in our curriculum. And students always go, how come we're doing this? This ain't cool. It's not fast. It's not cool. It's because I want them to learn how to play slowly. So they always come in and play it this way, even if they've chosen the right sticks. So what's wrong with that? Well, nothing technically, except there ain't no music happening. It's all just rhythm. It's note, 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 note. So when I talk about the stick in my handout, and you should read it, it's not perfect. It was done pretty quickly, but when I talk about the stick defines the sound, that's really, really important. If I hit the drum with this stick, even if I use the most legato stroke on the planet, you hear those notes as being separated. Whereas this, that's the really serious staccato stroke, very edgy, pointed sound. It's still more legato than that, period. Easy enough. So the idea is the stick defines the sound, the stroke defines what we say with that sound. How I want the students to approach this is quarter, 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 eighth, quarter, quarter, eighth, quarter, 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 sixteenths, quarter, quarter, quarter. Now, it's totally legato. It's so much more relaxed. And here's the beautiful thing about it. I can play a phrase with a staccato stroke, but man, again, I'm working too hard. I don't want to work that hard, so I can play the same basic phrase, but it's so much more musical. With a legato stroke. So the stroke legato and the stroke staccato are about, again, what we are saying with the stick, but the stick is primarily the definition of the sound. Same thing is true on marimba. And I think a lot of marimbas play with too much piston stroke when they're trying to play melodic music. I'm sure you've heard lots about that this week. And a lot of people play with a very legato stroke when they're trying to play very rhythmical music. And the music of Bach sometimes are remarkably rhythmical, really cool. I mean, the man understood rhythm in addition to perfect melodies. But a lot of times, and Gordon Stout, same thing. Sometimes beautiful melodies, sometimes really rhythmical things. You have to adjust your stroke. And by the way, you can combine the two. When I play like the Beethoven 7th Symphony excerpt, I play using a legato stroke in my right hand. It's not the loudest, but a staccato stroke in my left hand. Because it brings out that 16th note really clearly. So you can even combine staccato and legato within the same exact excerpt. Okay. So many more things we could talk about, but the main thing is read over the handout that I sent you. If you have any questions along the way, you can email me. I'm sorry this was kind of a dry and maybe not nearly as thrilling as any of the other clinics, but this is the stuff I believe in. It's the stuff I live and perform with all the time. And when you go into an audition room and you know already how it's going to sound, there's no chance taking. I know I'm going to play that cleanly. Those eighth notes are going to be perfect. That Mozart's not going to sound like Brahms. All of these things, you're going to automatically be in the top 10%. Because Timpani auditions are challenging, they're hard. And, I've won some smaller ones, I've participated in larger ones. Maybe I was a little too much the composer guy to be totally dedicated to winning the big gig, I don't know. But I love playing timpani. I still get to play with a number of orchestras in the area. And all of these subtleties please me when they work. And so, go out there and find a timpanist to take some lessons with. but always feel free to email me. I'm glad to answer questions and thoughts. And, you know, down the road, maybe even, we're all hoping Zoom goes away, but, you know, it's not. So there's even a chance maybe a lesson down the road too, who knows. Anybody have any questions before I go on to hearing some people play? If there is anybody. Sure.
It's just kind of about like the terminology, because this whole rotation thing, I also hear other people say it's like a wrist thing, but to me it feels like it's more of a forearm rotation because
Well,
it's your
yeah.
elbow joint rotating.
Yeah, no, right. And in fact, Ed Soph, you know, when he would ride on a cymbal, as most drum set players will do, he calls this an arm stroke. But here's the difference. And I mean, this is a great questions. Really great question. An arm stroke for me is this. Notice the motion of the arm. Now the wrist is still in the same position, the arm. The trouble with this is you will start to get a lot of inconsistencies when the arm gets involved. Same thing with the fingers. The reason I abandoned fingers for anything but softer rolls, only softer rolls is all I use, is because fingers are actually hitting down harder than they're picking the stick back up. It's relying totally on rebound, and I don't want to rely on rebound. I'll use it, but I don't want to rely on it. So the reason I call this a wrist stroke is because for me, it's all about this rotation moment. There's no verticality to the arm. And, you know, again, when you're getting ready for an audition and you hear your tape come back and you're going, oh my gosh, you know, I can't play those 16th notes in Firebird evenly. Why not? Well, because maybe my arm is in motion. And the moment the arm gets in there, oh man, it just sends everything off into the potential for, you know. By the way, speaking of that, clarifying a rhythm. I'll take one more minute here. I have a little show and tell for you here. When I took lessons with Roland Koloff, one of his comments to me in lessons were, you know, that rhythm isn't clear. That rhythm isn't really very clear. You got to be clear. If they don't understand what the rhythm is, you know, it's like mumbling. You're not going to, they don't know what you're saying. And he said this, and I have my own modification of this, but you can all use this. I wrote it down in a book. Yes, I know, I'm the nerd. I wrote this down. But what clarifies a rhythm for us? Interestingly enough, most younger percussionists, and a lot of older ones too, phrase to the last note. They're always building to the last note. Everything they do is the last note. This, that, what rhythm did I just sing to you? I don't know. Was it a triplet? Was it a quintuplet? I don't know what that is. Mr. Koloff, who was a really very wise man, I learned lots of great things from him. Amazing, worth every penny, although I was very poor, but worth every penny of it. He said, rhythm, the first note of a rhythm, and if I were going to write anything down, this would be a good one. The first note of a rhythm is like the capital letter of a word. That's what he said. And immediately I went, okay, I kind of get that. Now I transfer it to something, after I got out of that lesson, I wrote it down. I knew what he wanted. I knew what he was going for. And by the way, I heard Michael Buxpan, Philadelphia principal percussionist, say the exact same thing, but I had forgotten it. I wrote it in my school notebook when I was in undergrad school. Completely forgot about it, came across it later. So it could very well have been something that Saul Goodman taught. I don't know. But this show and tell kind of helps a little bit. What we're going for is clear, clean, understood. So if you phrase to the last note, you don't really know what that rhythm is because your ear is just getting acquainted with it. It's just opening up and it hears the arrival. So what you have to do is this, number 2, which is to put emphasis on the first note. Not much, doesn't have to be much, but if you do this, it comes through clean and clear every time. You can still phrase it, which is what my third little thing is. You can still come out of a subtle accent and still put phrasing in, but it makes it clear. You know, there's Shostakovich 7th Symphony, so. If you phrase to that last note, you don't really hear it as a strong rhythm. You hear it as having a shape, which is fine, shape is good, but you'll hear a lot of players do what he's saying. I'm being a little bit subtle with it, but that automatically makes it clear. You can put accents on both sides of it too. It also makes it more confident, by the way. Here's what I changed it to. I thought about the many times that I have played and been spat upon sitting in the timpani chair in front of a chorus. You know, if you haven't had this experience, it's a great experience, you know, Verdi Requiem, etc. But there's a lot of moisture in the air if you're really close to them. It's okay. You just kind of have to dry the drums off every once in a while. But what does the conductor yell at the choir to do constantly? Articulate the consonants. That's what they yell at him for. Why? Because if I say, this is in my handout to you, if I say, hell, you think, wow, Deane's really talking about some serious stuff there. He's talking about, you know, a bad place in the afterlife or something. No, I meant to say the word tell. I just didn't pronounce the T. And you misunderstood me. Tell. Go tell it on the mountain. Go hell on. No. It's go tell it on the mountain. So this is really profound. I had to squeeze that in. There are other things I could say, but let's go on. We have still a few minutes. Who's going to play for me?
Christopher, before we go, we have time, and we've got 25 minutes or so if they want to ask you questions. But he's got a great point. Is there somebody that was planning to perform? I know somebody had written me earlier in this week. Is there anybody that wanted to play now?
Hi, yes, me.
Alexander, okay. What did you want to play?
The Menuetto from Beethoven 1.
Oh, very nice. Okay, that would be great. Oh man, talking about eighth notes and cleanliness.
Yeah, it's kind of rough.
Absolutely, this would be great. Okay, why don't you go ahead and you got drums handy?
Yeah, I have them right here. If anyone wants to ask a question while I finish getting set up real quick.
Sure.
Because I need to set up some audio stuff real quick.
Okay.
I have a quick question. Could you clarify what you mean? Because you've talked about the lift stroke and the rebound stroke, and then we're talking about legato and staccato. Are those? Is that something different?
Yes, I mean it is, and that's a great question. The idea about, first of all, legato means that the stick is on the head longer. Now we might be talking 30, 40 milliseconds longer or something. I mean, it's not that much, but remarkably on a marimba, on a timpani, especially on the more pliable instruments like bass drum and frankly, even snare drum, there is a subtle difference, but more so on marimba because of the interaction of the yarn on the interaction with the yarn to the bar. The felt. Part of the reason that it makes the stroke softer sounding is that in terms of milliseconds, it's arriving on the head, the stick is slightly collapsing. The felt is slightly impacting, just like the yarn on a marimba bar. So it's spreading out. It's a wider field of attack. And by spreading it out wider, it's richening the sound, but it's not going to put that bright point to the sound. The bright point is what makes things clear and projecting. No matter what stick you're using, it's going to automatically make it sound a little brighter, except maybe the wood stick or the super hard stick where there's such a subtle difference. So when I'm using the legato stroke, I'm trusting a lot the weight of the stick because I want to let it interact with the head longer. But the moment I really need to make that rhythm project, I've got to pull that stick up. The main difference between this how much pinch I'm putting in, even at the same dynamic level. And one of the things you do is as you practice combining those two at the same dynamic. Just listen carefully and like that. But because the middle range dynamics are typically, unless the drum is very low, like when I put the E down there, the stick is going to rebound off the head enough, but I'm always monitoring that. Am I getting a clean, clear articulation? And there is light staccato, medium staccato, heavy staccato, which is like pow. That's like the towel demonstration. That was the heavy staccato. It's a whip. In Texas, they use whips, but I used a towel because I don't have a whip. But you get the idea. What do they call it? Nine tail. I don't know. Mark,
I do. I think I don't know. I just never seen you do the towel whip before. I'm like fell out of my chair when you did this.
No, you have done it all the time. Well,
And you know what? It was super clear was that when you threw the towel at the stand, you heard the attack, and the stand, of course, jumped around. But when you did that whipping motion and hit the stand rung. I mean, you could hear the tone, you could hear the resonance, and your point was super clear. I mean, that was right on. So
exactly the same thing with the drum head, and it's a lot of work. Look, to really develop that, you got to break old habits. And it's hard, breaking all that. That's why I say go to the practice pad, put on something pleasurable, books on tape or whatever they call it now, audio tapes, whatever, audio recordings. But spend some time working on that idea of pulling the stick out. And eventually you will have a really strong usage of it. And again, I've seen Professor Ford play incredibly loud marimba in front of an entire wind ensemble. And he doesn't break bars. This man does not break marimba bars. Why doesn't he break them? I know you want to, Mark.
It's expensive. That's why.
No, but it's because he understands the physics about it. Yes, it's going to be a brighter sound. It is. So you compensate with a stick a little bit, maybe, but it's not going to break the bar unless there's an inherent flaw in the bar, which there are sometimes. It was once living and breathing. So, but generally, no, the man does not break bars, and he gets very upset with people when they do, as we all should. Highly endangered product, incredibly rare, and unfortunately, we didn't know that in the 60s when they were burning thousands and thousands of acres of it. It's just one of those great criminal things in conservation.
Christopher, can we tell a quick funny story before Alexander performs? Christopher Deane, Paul Rennick, and myself were performing a work when Professor Nick Williams was leaving UNT and moving away, and it was kind of a celebration for Nick and all. Anyway, so it's a trio marimba concerto with 3 people on 3 different instruments. We'd never kind of been in that situation before, and of course we had somebody out in the audience at the dress rehearsal, and Nick was conducting the group, and he turns around and he asks the person in the back, "How's the balance?" And this guy says, "Well, I'm really having a hard time hearing the band because of the marimbas." And I said, "What? Could you say that again?" And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm just having a hard time hearing the band because the marimbas are so loud." And I'm like, "Could you say that again?" And he said, "Well, what's wrong? You can't hear me?" I said, "No, I just really love hearing you say that over and over."
Yeah, that was a very funny moment.
It was just, but you can play loud with projection and really have a great tone. And of course, there was 3 of us all kind of doing it the same way, which was really effective, of course. Anyway, just made me think of that, Christopher. It was a good one.
Great story. So, Alexander, are you ready?
Yes, I'm gonna do a quick make sure my sound is okay for you guys. Is this distorted at all?
That's pretty good. That was good.
Cool. Now, real quick before I do this, do you want me to go ahead and count through the 20, well, not 20, more like 32 measures of rest, or just?
No, why don't you just go ahead and play? I mean, if you want to wait on the rests to play the end of that first sequence, because they're at what, 8 bars rest or something like that, go ahead and wait and count, because that's what you would do in an audition. Yeah, just play the first segment with those rests and then finish it out. So finish it out with those last 8 notes, okay? Okay, that's plenty. We got lots to talk about, my man. Anybody else here know this excerpt? Okay, well, it's Beethoven's first symphony, and of course, prior to that, people were saying, he thinks he's a Mozart. Who the heck is he? What does he know? When this symphony came out, people went, oh my gosh, the guy can actually really write music. I mean, this symphony really put him on the map. It's a wonderful symphony. I love playing it. I just got to play Symphony No. 2 about a month and a half ago. These are both from the same period, the first compositional period. But shockingly, the timpani parts are no easier than any of the other timpani parts, because Beethoven knew what he was doing. He knew how exciting timpani was, what a feature it was. Look, he quote unquote took lessons with Haydn, and Haydn was a great writer. And by the way, Haydn played some timpani. He knew how to play timpani. He had played timpani. And there's a great excerpt in the Blades book where he's correcting some guy in England about his tone. And by the way, sometimes I'm not totally enamored with the English playing either. But that's another story. Not everybody. I'm not slandering everybody. But there are some players out there that if they wanted to come take a lesson with me, they could. All right. There's some things we have to clean up about the notation, though. First of all, by the way, the sticks are hard. That's a good choice. Could go one softer maybe, but those are hard sticks. It's okay. Period-wise, would have been wooden sticks on parchment heads, much smaller drums. Makes perfect sense. But in an audition, let's just say, you'd maybe want to go one step prettier, just one, because there's no orchestra around you. So if you're taking an audition, make it a little bit prettier for the audition. The moment you're on stage in the finals, then go full tilt with your normal selection of sticks. But a lot of players have a completely different selection of sticks for one and the other. Okay, there's a misunderstanding about the notation. When you get to, is it letter A? I can't remember.
Letter A is the re-entrance after those opening
Okay,
hits.
So it's the first main entrance.
Yes.
You have 2/8 note pickup to the downbeat, okay?
Yeah.
How are you interpreting the notated rhythm of the downbeat?
Of the actual downbeat of the roll itself, or are you talking about that pickup?
Okay, understanding what you just said is the important point. It ain't a roll.
Okay.
It's not a roll. If you look in the score, those are 8th notes.
I don't have a score in front of me. I should.
Right.
Okay.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. But here's the deal. And usually I go into detail with this in my lessons too, because it's a highly misunderstood concept.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a dotted half note with a single slash on it there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that single slash, nobody gasp, means 8th notes. Always means 8th
Gotcha.
notes.
Understood.
Now, there are people that have made mistakes. Tchaikovsky, I think it's Symphony No. 2. There's a whole long passage where he's got 2 slashes, which ordinarily, by the way, means what?
16th notes.
Right, 16th notes. This is really important because I'm telling you, you play this, you go into an audition, you play a roll there, and you're out, you're gone. Because it's a rhythm, it's an 8th note. So always be very, very careful. The big famous passage in the 5th Symphony, Beethoven 5, the end of the 3rd movement transitioning to the 4th, has quarter notes. But then the last 8 bars it's the same thing, dotted half note with a 8th note slash. A lot of people start rolling right there. Ooh, bad idea. you know, and beware that when the 16ths come in later, they are 16ths. Beethoven is really clear about this, better than Schubert and Schumann and Mendelssohn and a lot of these other folks. He always wrote a trill when he wanted to roll, always. And when he wanted a rhythm, and that means in the Ninth Symphony, all those long, exhausting notes that have 3 slashes, those are 30-second notes, period. Okay, really important. Next, one thing to think about is this is early Beethoven. Whenever I play this, and when I've played this in auditions or even on stage, same with the Symphony No. 2, the dynamics are adjusted for a smaller orchestra. You know, even if it's a full orchestra, and it was the last time I played Symphony No. 2, you're still kind of thinking in terms of the timpani being, instead of forte, like it's first marked, Mezzo Forte, instead of fortissimo, forte. By the way, it makes it easier to play. That's not bad. Remember, I like that. Easy is good. Now, when we get to that stage, when you're playing the you're doing that little melody where you're playing, you'll get lost in there. It's easy to do because the offbeat feels kind of funky. If you're going to dampen, you don't need to dampen when you play the other note like you were doing, because it doesn't make that big a difference. Frankly, it's kind of wasted energy. However, you've got quarter note and 2 eighth note. Quarter note and 2 quarter notes rest there, correct?
Yes, correct.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And 2 and 3 are rests. Dampen gently on those rests. Dampen in between those quarter notes, because if you look at what the bass player is doing, they have the exact same music.
Okay.
Basically, and I admit I can't remember if they're pitzing or if they're just playing a really short bow stroke, but it's a short stroke. And this way you match them. Now, how important that is in the gig, I would say that 50% of the recordings you hear, nobody pays any attention to that.
Okay.
Well, it's okay, because in the performance, frankly, between you and me, it doesn't make that big a difference. However, for me in an audition, I think it really makes a huge difference, because it tells the committee, you know, that you're playing along with an instrument that's playing of short duration. So a lot of times I pay much more attention. You know, there's at the fourth movement of the symphony. I don't have time to play it. So Beethoven 5, the opening of the fourth movement. It's 3 quarter notes, which you, by the way, play as half notes, because everybody else has them as half notes. And then you have eighth note rest, eighth note rest, eighth note rest, eighth note rest, bum, 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 ba. It takes a lot of practice to really beautify those damps. It takes a lot of good practicing, but it's well worth it in an audition, because everybody in the orchestra has eighth notes. And if you're letting it ring over, it doesn't sound like the rest of the orchestra. Last but not least, I want you to work on that rotary motion that we talked about.
Yeah.
It's going to really, really, really clean those eighth notes up. Do I have time for one more comment? Okay, so whenever I'm playing anything like this, especially in an audition, and I won an audition about 7 years ago with a local orchestra, because I'm just here, I'm not doing anything, and I went to the audition, and basically all the extras in the Metroplex were there. Well, these are okay. So, by the way, which drums did you play this on? I couldn't tell. Was it on the 2926 or 3229 or 2926?
It was 3229. If you want a reasoning, it's because that way I can have the drums tuned up a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
And get a little more clear of a sound.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And you know, I've done it on both ways. When it's a really wet hall or in an audition where I want to make sure that those eighth notes are really clean and clear, I'll do it on the bottom 2 drums. Drums need a little bit of help. Okay, that's it. But what I'm also looking for, last but not least, is a skeleton. I want to hear a rhythmical skeleton. It kind of ties in with what Mr. Koloff told me about, you know, pronouncing the consonant maybe. But these aren't really that clear necessary rhythms. By the way, I can use more attacks at the end. You need to little more sforzando on those notes, but okay.
Sure.
Here it is. What I want to hear is, sorry. I don't know if I didn't do that very well, but the idea is, I want to hear that skeleton. Because that's what's going to bring ultimate definition to this. Play it a little softer than I just did. Okay, I know we've run out of time. There was somebody else, but I don't know if we have time for that, so I don't want to keep you all.
Thank you, Professor Deane.
Okay, hopefully that helped. Anybody have any final questions, comments, thoughts?
I have a question that I hope someone would ask, and I think it'd be great to hear. Chris, this is a non-timpani question. Can we shift gears away from the timpani? Okay, sorry. Your Etude for a Quiet Hall. Could you talk about your inspiration for that piece and you know, how did you come up with that concept?
Well, wow. That's a lot of cobwebs wrapped around that one. You know, it's really, I have to say that it's an unbelievable pleasure that every once in a while I hear somebody play it. You know, I mean, that piece is literally, next year it will be 40 years old. That's an old piece of music there.
Why don't we ask, is there anybody here that's performed that piece before? Etude for a Quiet Hall by Christopher Deane. An amazing, amazing work. You should all run now and check it out. Yeah.
Nice to see you, Gary, by the way. I didn't see you before, but there you are. Yeah, it's good to see you. So it started out as a piece. A friend of mine in college said, hey, you're taking comp lessons. Would you write me a piece for my recital? And I'm going, wow, my first request, my first commission. There was no money or anything, you know. And I said, sure. So I started working on this, and I'd actually been to a concert where I heard somebody play a piece for violin. I think it was Sagan, and I'm trying to remember who's the composer that wrote that. It's not Ravel. I think he wrote one too. Maybe it is Ravel. It's been a long time. But one of the things was there was bowing and plucking going on the violin at the same time. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? I mean, that's hard to do on a violin. So I thought, well, you know, we can do that on marimba. That's easy as pie, you know, it's easy. So I just started goofing around with that idea of sustaining and playing. And I realized with the middle roll, I could kind of do some things with the outer notes, and it seemed kind of cool. And, you know, I'm always looking for the motive. You know, my teacher was a good teacher, and he said, you know, you don't make good omelets without a good egg. Got to have a good egg. I thought, all right, how do you know it's a good egg? Well, hopefully it's fresh, but you know, that makes sense. You can't really make a full meal unless you have the protein first. So that was kind of the start of it. I was also a big Salvador Dali fan at the time. You know, still am. I mean, I still think, you know, I love the surrealist movement. It'll always be a part of me. But there was one of his paintings was called The Hour of the Cracked Face. And it's this very austere painting. It's beautiful, but it's very simple. And the human beings are all but nothing in it. They are the most insignificant thing there. And there's that kind of desert plain that's, you know, in southern Spain, and a very dark background, and this clock, and obviously the clock, not melting, by the way, but it had a cracked face. Very simple painting. But I loved the austerity of that painting. I just thought it was calming and beautiful and mysterious, and you know, what would it be like to be one of those little teeny tiny people in the picture. So that inspired some of my feeling behind the piece, what I was searching for. The fast section was just because I felt like I needed to just give it a shot and let the 30-second notes, which had been sort of encapsulated in this little figure, but I could let them fly around the room for a minute. And it's that simple, and it's a dumb idea. And, you know, it doesn't really necessarily relate to the first and the third part, but, you know, I was 19 years old and trying to write music that I thought made a difference. And, well, the guy came to me and he said, I don't have time to put your piece on my program, so I didn't finish it. You know, it was about halfway finished maybe, and I just put it away, and I had to go on and graduate and get things done. But there was this competition, the PAS marimba composition contest. I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll just finish it. I'll send it in, but there is no way a piece like this could ever win, period. I knew this. I knew it couldn't win because it's not a competition piece. It's just not. It's, you know, it's a piece of musical, in my heart, I felt like it was musical poetry. I can't write real poetry, so I thought maybe this is as close as I can get to it. I'm almost done, one more sentence. So I sent the thing in, completely forgot about it. I mean, just didn't even think about it. And somewhere in late September, I got a letter from the PAS, and because there were no computers back then, I owned a phone, by the way. But I didn't open it because I knew it was my dues, and they were probably $25. And I couldn't afford that, you know, $25. So I just let it sit there. I knew I had to get to it before late November. So I just let it sit there, let it sit there, let it sit there. And so in late October, I get this frantic call from a guy named F. Michael Combs, who used to teach at the University of Knoxville. And the first thing he said is, why haven't you sent us your stuff? And I said, well, sent stuff. And he said, you haven't sent us, you know, what we've been needing from you. And I'm going, golly, these people are really serious about their $25. They really want to get this. So I said, I know, it's sitting right there. I just, you know, just didn't think I could really afford it yet, but I'm going to do it. He says, what are you talking about? I said, well, you're talking about the dues, right? And he said, no, the composition contest. And I go over and I open this envelope, and this check floats down to the floor. And I won. And I was like, oh my gosh, how is this even possible? How is this possible? Well, the judges that year was Terry Applebaum of Northwestern, and Marta Sazinska, who's a great composer, great composer, and oh my gosh, was it Lee Stevens? Could it have been Lee Stevens? I don't think so.
I think it'd be too early for Lee. Maybe, might have been.
82. It might have been. I think it might have been, actually. I think it might have been. And they all just picked it. And so I will forever be grateful for PAS, because, you know, all of a sudden people were calling up saying, hey, can I get a copy of this piece of music? Yeah, sure, I'll send it to you. You know, eventually a guy published it, and you know, now it's you know, distributed by Innovative Percussion. They do a great job, and also. But thanks, Mark. I hope that wasn't too boring for anybody. But
no, I loved it, Chris. And that's the first. I mean, Chris has written many works for percussion, goodness, but that's the first one that I had taught. I knew that piece before I had met Christopher, and I remember just being touched by this music. And I had students play it. I played it, you know, and just trying to get inside, you know, his head of what he wanted to do with this music. It just really was intriguing. And then, lo and behold, several years later, I get to teach a clinic on a festival with Christopher Deane, and I know his piece. I know that one piece at least. And, you know, anyway, it's such a beautiful look at what's possible when something hasn't happened before in an instrument, and somebody with Chris's insight can take an idea and create reality with it. It's just exciting. It just was beautiful. Yeah.
Could anybody ever say anything nicer about this than you? Thank you so much.
Well, man, it's just, I love it. And so I just wanted you to talk about it. You don't talk about that piece very often. I just wanted to have it here, you know, with everybody. Yeah.
Well, I got lucky. That's all I can do.
No, I don't believe a word of that. Hey, does anybody have a last minute question for Christopher?
I actually do, if that's okay. So I was wondering just your thoughts on solo timpani repertoire, if you have any favorites or just what you think about the genre in general.
Wow, boy, that's a pretty loaded question, because of course, like any solo repertoire, it depends on what you're trying to project, what you're trying to do with it. And You know, I have to say that a lot of composers misunderstand the instrument. You know, they throw 1,000 notes at the instrument all the time, and it's such a beautiful melodic instrument. Number one, I mean, when it's played melodically, it can really be very, very special. And fast is good. You know, there's a time and a place for everything. But you know, some of these pieces are just overboard with what they do with it. Well, you know, I mean, of course, for me, everything starts with the Carter pieces because Elliott Carter satisfied so many levels of musicianship in those pieces. And I know a lot of modern people go, those old things, you know, we've gone way beyond that. We got all this other literature. I go, yeah. But you got to know those because those are the core. They're the Bach for timpani for us. Elliott was a genius of the highest order. He won multiple Pulitzer Prizes, you know, the Prix de Rome, Prix du Disque, MacArthur Award, Genius Award, virtually, you know, Grammys, every award you can win, the man won. And he wrote 8 concert solos for timpani, not etudes, although we learn from him. Here's the thing, real quick, great composer. Go anywhere in the world and talk to people that are knowledgeable and they know who Elliott Carter is. Brilliant music, wonderful rhythmic music. Number 2, they used the timpani in ways nobody else had ever used them before, period. He explored, thanks partly to Jan Williams, these incredible techniques, and which is why some people hate them because, oh, well, that's not orchestral timpani playing. You know? I go, yeah, who cares? That's not what it's about. That's not what he was doing. You know, he was writing solo literature for us. Number 3, he changed how we play the instruments. I mean, how many pieces do you play on marimba when it actually changes your technique? Maybe a lot of them, maybe a lot of them. But those are the ones you really need to thank. You thank those pieces because they are giving you a gift. The composer is giving you the gift of enlightenment through these techniques. So it's pretty important. So already I've nailed 3: famous composer, concert solos that have been played in Carnegie Hall and multiple times, etc. Use techniques that were never heard or thought of or seen before, thanks to Jan Williams, and changes us as players. Wow, that's not just satisfied 4 categories of import. How many pieces do you play in your life that do that? Velocities, well, famous composer. You know, maybe the technique changes how we play the instrument. Maybe, you know, maybe it satisfies 3 of the 4, maybe 4. I don't know. It's an important piece. Merlin, you know, 6 studies. These are amazing pieces that change the instrument for us. Those are pieces that we need to love and cherish and embrace, but the Carter piece too. After that, it really kind of boils down to, I hear new pieces all the time. Some of them are really great. Some of them I'm not particularly enamored with, but you know, I'll tell you this, John Tafoya has a nice list on his website, which is really good. You might go there for that. Look at some of those pieces. You know, I like Jeffrey Payton's piece that came to mind with tape. Sometimes the tape pieces overwhelm the instrument, and I never prefer that. I always want the instrument to be the preeminent thing. You know, the recording shouldn't, but I didn't mean to throw that one out like that's more important than the other. I just can't think of anything right offhand with the time we have left. So hope that helps.
We've got one more question, Professor, and I think then that we probably should close it up. This one's from Jesse. He's writing in the chat. He says, what do you think about the melodic timpani project that Diana Loomer is doing?
I don't know anything about it.
Me neither. Jesse, can you tell us about it?
Oh yeah, it's like incredible stuff. I found out about it where she played like an arrangement of Jupiter or something, and like the whole melody was just like pedaling. It's crazy. It's on Casey's podcast. They talked to her about it,
Okay, all right.
and it's very cool.
Is that what she's largely doing? Is taking other pieces and adapting them? I mean, I know I've seen people play Bach on 9 timpani, and you know, which is pretty impressive. So that's
It's actually like the project is to commission new works for this kind of melodic timpani writing. I think like John Zathis has taken some interest. He's written two pieces, I think.
That's
for this.
great. That's great. And as long as people embrace the project for what it is, that sounds fantastic. Of course, there's this piece by, I think is it Robert Horner? It's called The Tuneful Timpanist. I used to own it. I think somebody borrowed it and never returned it. But it's a book called The Tuneful Timpanist. And there are lots of tunes, Christmas tunes and Hanukkah tunes. And, it's a good book. I should buy another copy of it because it's a really good way to practicing melodies on timpani is the best liberating approach to learning the pedals of the timpani. A lot of people just set them and forget them. Don't do that. You can't play John Williams and David Maslanka and these people. You can't play their music unless you are willing to ride the bicycle called timpani with pedals. You have to pedal the drum. So anything that you do like that is great. By the way, there's a Tiffany Concerto that I dearly love. I've played the Doherty, which I love that piece. I think it works great. Very popular piece, to Raise the Roof. I advise you to learn it if you're a timpanist. Like people love to do it. There's a good wind symphony version of it too. It's done probably more often than any other, but a piece by Russell Peck called Rhythm. I think it's called Rhythm Gradation, but it's also the name of a Japanese piece that I'm not remembering who the composer is. I played it too. That's a beautiful piece too, by the way, Rhythm Gradation, if you put stuff into it. But the is it the Rhythm of Life? Oh gosh. This is the trouble with being old. And I played that piece. I gave one of the premieres of it. Look up Russell Peck and look up Timpani Concerto.
I think it's harmonic rhythm is what you're
Harmonic rhythm. Oh gosh, thank you. See, I'm too old to be doing this. Harmonic rhythm. It's a great piece, and I worked with Russell. He consulted with me when he wrote it, and it's a beautiful piece. It's a wonderful piece. It has a lot of pedaling in it, a lot of tuning. That's really effective. It's not a rhythm fest. It really sells the timpani in a great way. So, harmonic rhythm. That's it. That's the one. So, you should look that up. I'm sure it's still available.
All right. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough, Christopher. Your thoughts about tone production and musicianship are just never ending, and it's just wonderful to hear you talk about it as always. And you've touched all of us. Thank you so much. Guys, what's happening tonight is that we have another faculty Q&A. It starts at 7 p.m., so it's about an hour and a half, hour and 20 minutes or so from now. So I hope you get a chance to grab a bite to eat. Come back and we're going to talk for a little bit. We've got some really interesting things planned, so we hope that you'll join us tonight at 7. Everybody that's here, an applause for Professor Deane. Thank you so much. Love you, brother. Right on, buddy. Right on, man.
Thanks so much for this opportunity. I hope something of value was shared. So take care, everybody.
Absolutely.
Have a great end of the seminar.
Take care.
Hey folks, one